The pain started 2 weeks ago, sharp stabbing just beneath my ribs. At first, I blamed the lentil stew, then my age, then the weather. But when it returned with force one Sunday morning, I knew something was wrong. I barely made it to the urgent care, doubled over in the front seat of the Uber. The nurse took one look at me and moved me straight past the waiting room. They ran scans, blood work, ultrasound. I lay still under harsh lights while the machine clicked around me. When the doctor came in, his tone dropped. "You need surgery," he said. "Emergency gallbladder removal. You're already showing signs of infection." My mouth felt dry. My fingers twitched on the hospital sheet. "Do you have someone we can call?" he asked. I did. One person. My son. I called Draven as they were prepping me for the OR. The nurse beside me was gently removing my earrings. My phone buzzed twice before he answered. "Hey, Mom, can we talk later? I'm boarding." Boarding. Yeah, Santorini, remember. The retreat Lurian booked months ago. She's been manifesting this forever. I could hear airport announcements in the background. I swallowed hard. "I'm being taken in for emergency surgery, Draven. I thought you should know." There was a pause. Not long. Just enough to remember what silence felt like. "Well, you'll be fine, right? You're strong. And hospitals are safe," Lurian says. Worrying lowers our vibration. "I'll call you when we land." The line went dead. The nurse reached for my phone. I handed it over and closed my eyes. In the operating room, someone covered me with a warm blanket. Someone else asked me to count backward from 10. I didn't remember reaching 5. When I woke, there were no flowers, no familiar voices. Just the hum of the IV pump and the rattle of a cart in the hallway. My chest felt hollow, but my body ached enough to remind me I was alive. Later, when they wheeled me to discharge, I took a rideshare home. That night, I opened my laptop, typed his name into Instagram, and there he was drinking champagne on a balcony in Santorini. The driver didn't offer to help me to the door. I didn't ask. I held the railing with one hand and pressed the paper pharmacy bag against my stitches with the other. Each step felt like something inside me was shifting, reminding me that even my own body now required negotiation. Inside the house was exactly as I'd left it, still clean, expectant. I had made the bed tightly that morning before I left, like I was afraid I wouldn't come back. My casserole dish was still drying on the rack. I eased myself onto the kitchen stool, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. There were no flowers on the counter, no message on the machine. Nothing slid under the door. I drank water from a chipped mug and took the first of the antibiotics. The bitter taste lingered. I opened the freezer and stared for a while. I ended up defrosting a small tub of congee I had made weeks ago and warmed it slowly on the stove, stirring with one hand, holding my side with the other. When it was ready, I could only stomach 3 bites. My mouth moved, but it all felt mechanical, nourishment, without comfort. Later, I shuffled to the living room and sat in the recliner. I checked my phone once more, no missed calls. My hand hovered over his name. I didn't press it. Instead, I opened Instagram again, and there he was, already on a boat in Santorini. The caption read, "Energy cleanse on the water. No more dead weight." Lurian's hand was on his chest. I stared at that phrase, "no more dead weight." I wasn't sure if it was about me. Maybe it didn't matter. The damage came from the fact that it could be. I closed the app, turned off the phone entirely, and leaned back into the recliner. My body ached, but the emptiness inside me was heavier. It wasn't physical. It was the kind of pain that lived in silence, in spaces between what someone should say and what they don't. By nightfall, I had made my decision. I turned on the lamp and reached for my late husband's folder. The folder smelled faintly of paper and time. My husband's handwriting on the front, neat looping letters, had started to fade, but I could still make it out a state. Emergency access. He had labeled everything back when we were still young enough to think planning ahead would make us invincible. Inside were tabs, plastic sleeves, typed summaries, copies of titles and deeds. I hadn't touched it in over a decade. After Emrith passed, I'd kept everything exactly as he left it. Somehow, opening it now felt more intimate than visiting his grave. There was the deed to the house, only my name on it now. The insurance policies. The stocks he bought in companies that no longer existed, but tucked between all of it was a letter I had forgotten existed. Dated 12 years ago. In his hand, again. Zarella, if you ever need to move things quickly, call Silas. He knows where everything is. He helped me set it up to protect you and Draven. I love you. E. Draven. Even the sound of his name felt different now. I remembered the night I stayed up till 3 a.m., stitching his Halloween costume because he cried when the store ran out of the dragon one. I remembered driving to 3 counties to find the tablet he wanted for college orientation. I remembered co-signing his first business loan when no one else believed in him. I gave, and he took and took. But this wasn't about spite. It was about recognition, about finally seeing myself not as someone useful or reliable or to be leaned on, but as someone who mattered even when I needed leaning. I flipped to the last page and pulled out a contact card. Silas Hennick. The number was still good. I stared at it for a long time before picking up the phone. He answered on the second ring. I said my name, and he was quiet for a moment before replying, Zarella, I was wondering when you'd call. I told him I was ready, and that I wouldn't be changing my mind. Draven stopped by 2 days after getting back from Greece. I wasn't expecting him, but I wasn't surprised either. He never came without needing something. Lurian came with him, gliding in like she was entering a spa lobby. She smelled like lavender oil and something sharper cynicism, maybe. I had set the kettle to boil out of habit. When I asked if they'd like tea, Lurian gave me a tight smile. Oh, no thanks. I'm still detoxing from processed leaves. She laughed softly, as if that made her charming. Draven chuckled too, though his eyes were scanning the living room like he hadn't remembered what my furniture looked like. We made small talk. I asked how the trip went. He described cliffside villas, raw honey facials, and some kind of sound healing dome that apparently realigned his spirit. I nodded politely and said nothing when Lurian mentioned how freeing it was to unplug from needy people and obligations. I brought up the surgery. They said it was close. If I'd waited another day, Draven waved his hand. But you didn't wait. You got it done. And you're here. So it worked out right. He smiled like that settled it. Lurian leaned forward. And I'm so glad your energy's stabilized now. Illness comes from emotional suppression, you know. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice even. I'm sure. Then came the real reason for their visit. Draven leaned back casually. Hey, I've got this new expansion phase for the company. Big potential, really. Just need someone to co-sign a lease for a workspace downtown. Temporary, of course. Only 6 figures. Nothing major. He said it like he was asking me to hold his jacket. I folded my hands and nodded. I'll think on it, I said. He smiled, satisfied. After they left, I sat in the silence of the kitchen, listening to the faint scent of lavender fade into nothing. That evening, I pulled Silas's card from the drawer and called him again. He picked up instantly. I told him I was ready to move everything, this time permanently. Silas met me the next morning in a quiet corner office above a florist shop. He was older now, of course, but still had the same steady gaze I remembered from Emrith's funeral, back when I could barely hold a pen to sign the death certificate. He offered me coffee, which I declined, and we got to work. He had kept copies of all the documents my husband once prepared, including the ones I hadn't even known existed. Emrith had set up a dormant holding company years before his death, Vareth. Holdings quiet, clean, untouched. It was meant for contingencies, Silas explained. things Emreth hoped we'd never need. I listened carefully as Silas outlined the process. The deed to my home would be transferred to the holding company. My retirement fund's savings and remaining shares would follow. The trust we'd once earmarked for Draven's future would be removed from his reach, frozen under Vireth's protective structure. I signed the papers slowly, each stroke deliberate. I thought I would feel vindicated, but all I felt was calm, a kind of stillness I hadn't had in years. When it came time to revisit my will, Silas asked gently, "Do you want to leave anything to Draven?" I paused. I thought of him as a child, his gap-toothed smile, the way he used to run into my arms with scraped knees. I thought of the man who now laughed off my hospitalization like it was an inconvenience. "No," I said, voice steady. "Not to him." Silas nodded. "Anyone else?" And that's when I said her name aloud for the first time in years. Malus Thorne. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Family." "His daughter," I said. "He doesn't speak of her. But I haven't forgotten." We filed the changes that day. I walked out into the street as a different woman than the one who entered, still sore, still stitched, but intact. Back at home, I set the new documents in a fresh folder, labeled in my own hand this time. Later that night, I saw Lurian post a brunch photo, my silver tea set gleaming on her table. I stared at the photo for a long time. There it was, my silver tea set resting on a pale linen runner next to mimosas and dragon fruit slices, tagged at some rooftop brunch downtown. The caption read, "Channeling ancestral grace. Manifesting abundance with my soul tribe." I remembered polishing that set with a soft cloth every month ever since Emreth's mother passed it down to us on our 5th anniversary. It wasn't just silver. It was memory. And they hadn't even asked. I zoomed in on the photo. My initials were still etched into the base of the sugar bowl. I closed the app and placed the phone face down. I felt no anger, just a sense of something final clicking into place. They didn't just forget me, they'd already started claiming what they thought I would leave behind. I opened the cabinet where the tea set had once lived. Empty shelf. At some point, maybe while I was sedated in the hospital, they had come in, quietly, as if the house was already theirs. That evening I went to the safe. I hadn't touched it in years, but my fingers still remembered the combination. Inside was a flash drive one Emreth had labeled backup copies, just in case. It contained digital scans of everything we'd owned and planned for. Deeds, passwords, a gift transfer form for the tea set I'd once drafted, but never signed. I added the newly signed trust changes and estate documents, labeled it all clearly, and placed the drive into a small lockbox. Not for safekeeping. For clarity. I made myself tea from a chipped ceramic pot and drank it alone by the kitchen window. Outside, the wind shook the hydrangeas in the dark. By morning, I had reviewed every account, every beneficiary, and every title. Everything was accounted for. Everything had shifted except for one final piece. I picked up the phone and called the bank. The voice on the other end recognized me immediately. I gave the account numbers and said what I needed to say. The woman paused, then said, "We'll begin the freeze today." The first call came before breakfast. I let it go to voicemail. The second one came 15 minutes later. Then a text. Then another. "Draven Mom. Something's up with the development account. It's not letting me transfer. Did you touch anything? Can you check? This is serious." I finished my oatmeal before I replied. "Me. Yes." I froze it. He called instantly. I didn't answer. He left a voice message that began calm and ended frantic. The third one was all shouting. I played it on speaker while sorting laundry. "Are you kidding me? Do you even understand what you've done? The deposit was due today. I had contractors waiting. This is sabotage. I trusted you. What the hell is wrong with you?" I folded towels white over white, smooth and quiet. An hour later, a post went up on Lurian's page. Sometimes the universe tests your vibration with false scarcity. Stay centered. Stay luminous. Below it, a photo of her meditating barefoot on a yoga mat that looked suspiciously like my living room rug. I didn't react. I went for a walk instead. The morning air was cool, the breeze easy. I picked up a few fallen lemons from my neighbor's tree the way I used to when Draven was a boy and liked them sliced with sugar. That afternoon, Silas called to confirm the transfers had finalized. The house accounts and stocks were now formally under Vareth Holdings, locked under protections no one could bypass without legal authority. Draven would find himself talking to a wall if he tried. "You've done it," Silas said. "Clean and quiet." I thanked him, then checked my mail. A single envelope. Inside was a flyer. Draven's startup was hosting a visionary investor brunch this weekend. I smiled faintly at the irony. I placed the flyer in the shredder piece by piece until only fine strips remained. Then I sat at my desk, pulled out a fresh notepad, and wrote one name at the top: Malus Thorne. He came storming up the walkway the next morning loud enough that I heard him before he reached the porch. I didn't open the door. I watched him from the living room window as he jabbed at the doorbell again and again, pacing like a man who had lost something but didn't know what. Mom opened the door. "This is ridiculous." I took my time. When I finally stepped out, I was dressed neatly, navy cardigan, slacks, soft shoes. Calm. Draven turned, hands flying in the air. "You're ruining everything I've built," he shouted. "Do you even understand the position I'm in? Investors are asking questions. Contractors are threatening to sue. This house. That account. That trust. You're cutting off your own legacy." I walked past him and stood on the front steps. My neighbors were pretending not to watch, but I saw curtains shift, blinds flick open. I didn't care. I looked at him and spoke plainly. "What you built was a castle on borrowed land. I helped lay the first stone, Draven. But you took every brick and acted like it was yours alone." He blinked, thrown off for just a second. "I was going to put it all back once things stabilized," he muttered, trying to soften his tone. I just needed time. I didn't respond. Instead, I held out an envelope. He took it, eyes scanning the legal header. "What is this?" "The updated will. Your name's not in it." His mouth opened, then closed. I continued, my voice firm. "You'll find contact details inside. If you want to challenge anything, speak to the firm. I won't be discussing it further." "You can't be serious," he whispered. "I'm absolutely serious," I replied. "And if you don't step off my property, I'll call someone who takes trespassing seriously too." He stared at me, mouth twitching, with words he didn't dare say in public. Then he turned and walked away, without looking back. I stood on the steps until he disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, sat at my desk, and opened the file I had started the night before Melis's. I found her through a quiet online search. Malus Thorne, 17, attending community college 2 towns over. Her profile was sparse. No smiling selfies, no group photos, just a sketch of a tree in charcoal and a quote from a poet I hadn't heard of. It was enough. I called the registrar's office, said I was a family member, and asked if I could leave a message for her. I didn't expect a response. 2 days later, I got a text. "Hi, this is Malus. You called. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near her campus." She walked in hesitantly, her eyes scanning until they settled on me. Her resemblance to Draven was faint, but there's something in the shape of her mouth, the sharp intelligence behind her gaze. "I didn't think you were real," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Neither did I replied softly. She stirred her tea without drinking. "He said you were gone. Or just not interested." I kept my hands folded on the table. "He never told me about you. I only found out through an old tax form your mother filed years ago. Your name was listed." I never forgot it. Malis nodded slowly, as if absorbing something she didn't have words for yet. We talked for over an hour. She was studying graphic design while working evenings at a bookstore. Her voice cracked slightly when she mentioned having to pause classes next semester if she couldn't make rent. I reached into my purse and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check already signed, made out in her name. She stared at it without touching it. "I'm not trying to buy your affection," I said, "but you deserve better than silence and scraps. This isn't from Draven. This is from me." Her eyes filled, but didn't spill. She nodded once and placed the envelope gently into her backpack. Before we parted, I handed her a business card with Silas's name. "Call him if you ever need anything official. He knows what's yours." That night, I updated the trust to make it clear Malis wouldn't just inherit. She'd belong. 1 month later, I sat across from Silas at his office as he reviewed the final documents. Everything was done quietly, thoroughly, and with no room for reversal. The trust was now under irrevocable terms. The assets were protected, and Malis was officially named the sole beneficiary, with provisions for education, housing, and a future she could shape on her own terms. Silas looked up from the paperwork. "Any regrets?" I shook my head. Not one. The house remained in my name through the holding company, and I had no plans to leave it anytime soon. I still trimmed the rose bushes myself, still folded my linens on Sundays, still wrote grocery lists by hand. But something in me had shifted. I no longer moved through the house, wondering when Draven would drop by unannounced, or if I'd be asked for more. He did send one last email. Just 3 words. "This is betrayal." I read it once, closed the tab, and then replied with only 1 sentence. "This is accountability." He didn't respond. I kept the printed email in my drawer beside Emrith's old letter. One was written in love, the other in fury, but both reminded me who I was and who I refused to become. Malis came over the following Sunday. She brought homemade cookies and asked for help drafting a resume. We sat together in the sunlit kitchen, and I told her stories not just about her father, but about Emrith, about this house, about how silence is sometimes mistaken for weakness until it isn't. Before she left, she hugged me. It was gentle, careful, and real. When she was gone, I sat by the window, a cup of warm tea in hand. The silver set was long gone, but I didn't miss it. What mattered wasn't what had been taken, but what I'd chosen to reclaim. I live here still, just as before. Only now no one touches this house unless I allow it. And everything I've built is protected by something stronger than trust. It's protected by choice.